When Emma agreed to house-sit her aunt's secluded cabin deep in the woods, she thought it would be the perfect escape from the chaos of city life. The cabin was charming, with its rustic wooden beams, a crackling fireplace, and a panoramic view of towering pines. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest seemed to change. The once inviting woods turned into an endless sea of shadows, and an unsettling stillness crept in. On her first night alone, Emma was unpacking her things when she heard it. A faint knock at the front door. She froze, her heart pounding. The cabin was miles from the nearest neighbor, and the winding dirt road leading there was barely passable. Who could possibly be out there? Cautiously, Emma approached the door. "Hello?" she called, her voice trembling. No answer. She opened the door a crack and peered out into the darkness. No one was there. Just the whisper of the wind through the trees. Dismissing it as her imagination, she locked the door and returned to her unpacking. But as the night wore on, the knocks came again, louder this time. She checked the windows, scanning the moonlit forest, but saw nothing. The feeling of being watched settled over her like a heavy blanket. By the third night, Emma was exhausted. The knocks had persisted every evening, always at random intervals. She had started keeping a fire roaring and a flashlight within reach. That night, as she lay in bed, she heard something new. Faint whispers, as if a conversation was happening just outside her window. She sat up, clutching the blanket tightly. Gathering her courage, Emma crept to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The beam of her flashlight pierced the darkness, illuminating the trees. For a moment, she thought she saw movement, a shadow darting between the trunks. Then, silence. The next morning, Emma ventured outside to look for tracks, but the ground was undisturbed. She told herself it had to be animals or her imagination. Yet, the unease lingered. She decided to call her aunt, but the call wouldn't connect. The signal was weak and the cabin's landline was out of service. She was truly alone. That evening, Emma lit every lamp in the cabin. She double-checked the locks and kept her phone close. As the hours ticked by, she began to relax, thinking maybe the strange occurrences had stopped. But just as she was about to drift off, a loud bang echoed through the cabin, followed by a scraping sound, like nails on wood. Emma grabbed the fireplace poker and tiptoed toward the sound. It was coming from the back door. She peered through the small window and saw nothing. Gathering her courage, she opened the door, flashlight in hand. The beam caught a glimpse of something on the porch, a handprint smeared in mud or perhaps something darker. Her breath hitched as she scanned the area. Then she saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the woods, just beyond the reach of her light. It was tall and unnaturally thin, its face obscured by shadow. Emma's scream caught in her throat as the figure slowly raised an arm and pointed at her. She slammed the door shut, bolted it, and backed away. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely grip the poker. The whispers returned, louder now, as if they were coming from inside the cabin. Emma spun around, her eyes darting to every corner. "Who's there?" she shouted, her voice cracking. The whispers stopped. The cabin fell eerily silent. Then a single word echoed through the room, low and guttural. "Leave." Emma bolted to her room, locking the door behind her. She shoved a dresser in front of it and crouched in the corner, clutching her phone. To her relief, there was a single bar of signal. She dialed 911, her fingers trembling. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's outside, Emma whispered. They've been knocking, whispering. I think they're trying to get in. Stay on the line, the operator said. Officers are on their way. But the nearest town was over 30 minutes away. Emma's eyes darted to the window where she thought she saw movement again. Then, the whispers started once more, louder and more insistent. They seemed to be coming from all around her. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the cabin into darkness. Emma's breath came in shallow gasps as she fumbled for her flashlight. The beam illuminated the room, but the shadows seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. Then she heard it. the sound of footsteps inside the cabin. Emma pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering. The footsteps grew louder, closer. She aimed the flashlight at the door, and for a moment, she thought she saw a shadow pass beneath the crack. "Go away!" she screamed. The footsteps stopped. Minutes felt like hours as she sat there, clutching the poker and flashlight. Finally, red and blue lights flashed outside. The sound of car doors slamming and voices calling out filled the air. Emma ran to the window, relief washing over her as she saw the officers. She unlocked the door and stumbled outside, tears streaming down her face. "There was someone here," she said. "They were inside." The officers searched the cabin and surrounding woods but found no sign of anyone. No footprints, no evidence of forced entry. The only thing they discovered was the handprint on the back door, now smeared and unrecognizable. Emma didn't stay to find out what was haunting the cabin. She left that night, vowing never to return. Her aunt, puzzled by the story, claimed she had never experienced anything unusual in the cabin, but Emma knew what she saw, and sometimes late at night in her apartment she swore she could still hear faint whispers as if the shadows had followed her home.